So, Luca Guadagnino came to my attention first with A Bigger Splash. That was a pretty good movie, and I like his stuff in general. Most of us know him from Call Me By Your Name, that sweet summer romance between Timothy and that other dude. Probably his most beloved film. I tend to concur with that idea. I'm conflicted about his Suspiria remake. He really took the color out of the original. Bones and All, I actually pretty like. Another nice romance with a cannibal twist. But usually his movies go for a slower tempo, perhaps a slow burn. But with his latest, The Challengers, he was basically given the assignment to do a love triangle tennis movie. So he decided to up the tempo at the speed of a tennis ball. When you're watching, you might even feel like you are the tennis ball, bouncing back between timelines, between perspectives. It's got this kinetic energy that syncs up with the matches in the film, the tennis matches. It's real well done, really well edited, along with the score by Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross. It really kept me focused throughout, though maybe once or twice knocked me off balance. There's a particular scene or two, or maybe the music is a little bit much. But overall, thanks to the outstanding performances of this trio, Zendaya, Josh O'Connor, and Mike Feist, it really held a strong grip on me. If anything, it's a kind of sports drama that appeals to me, in which the sport is the battleground, maybe even the backdrop of this contentious love triangle. I think it's probably Luca Guadagnino's most accessible film too, because of its pacing and the inherent allure of this battle for love on and off the court. Perhaps the movie underserves Zendaya's character a bit in favor of these two boys. But to fully get into its hits and misses, let's break down some key scenes here in the spoiler zone. Yeah, this feels like an actual sports movie I want to watch. Oh, I just want to point out that we get some equal opportunity skin in this movie. You know, as a society, we want to move beyond the hetero gaze into the pansexual gaze. I think I would like that. Anyways, okay, so one key thing here is, here's the introduction of their marriage, Art and Tashi here. Tashi wants to push him forward to become a champion because she can't, because she's had that injury, so she's living vicariously through Art. And Art, in fact, freaking loves Tashi, and there's a bit of a question throughout, like, how much does Tashi love Art? I love you. I know. She just walks away. Very cold, very cold. She's into the sport. She's more about the career. Yeah, that's a sign of not so good things to come. Maybe with the exception of one other scene, this is probably the sexiest the movie gets. Perhaps if this movie was a little more bi-curious, there would have been more tension, more scenes of tension between Art and Patrick. And it's still there, it still simmers, but it's mostly a bromance simmering underneath. The key thing here is that Tashi is the dominant force of this trio. She gets more pleasure from controlling them than actually loving them, I think. At this point, she'd rather have them make out and watch and then step away. She's got to go focus on her tennis career, She can't be wasting time with these little boys. And so eventually Patrick wins and gets her number, and they start dating and all. But I do like the back and forth, the timelines. Like, a lot of times I'm often a bit cautious and wary about movies that go back and forth in time. Sometimes I think it's a crutch for a lot of movies to begin at the ending or something. But I think this movie does it really well and cuts at the right moments. We'll get into a little more in some scenes. Okay, so here's a key scene where Art actually drops a bombshell. In an interview actually I saw with Zendaya, Josh, and Mike, they were saying how really Art is at fault here for ruining the whole trio, the whole relationships here, because he's doing something shady here. He's actually, he's saying that, Patrick doesn't love her, so she shouldn't be with him. He's trying to break it up because, of course, he wants to be with Tashi. But there's probably some truth in the fact that Patrick isn't a long-term relationship kind of guy. I don't think he actually said that he doesn't love her to Art here. Art is just surmising that. Obviously, he's jealous and he wants he feels like she deserves better than Patrick, and he feels like he could fill that role better as the boyfriend. Of course, Tashi sees this as a shitty move and presumptuous, that thinking that she wants love. Her main focus is obviously her tennis career. Dating to her is secondary. But I think she's also trying to be protective of her own feelings. There's a part of her that does want to have someone that's devoted to her, not just a fling. Okay, so actually a little bit before that, we have this scene that sets up the final climactic match. This is pretty much right after Patrick and Tashi started dating, and then Art wants to know if they slept with each other, but Patrick doesn't want to kiss and tell. So Art suggests, just like give me a sign, give me a sign to let me know that you are sleeping with each other. Patrick points out that Art has this little quirk that right before he serves the ball, he puts it right in that little hole at the bottom of the racket there. So Art's like, okay, well, you do that if you in fact slept with her. That way I can know without you telling me with words, And so now he knows, That comes in as a secret little code between them, as this match here that we're constantly switching back to concludes in the climax. So here's a love scene that really demonstrates the dynamic between Tashi and Patrick. They're trying to get in some sexy time here, but of course, Tashi always brings it back to tennis. She starts critiquing Patrick on his tennis routine. So the whole conversation that Tashi had with Art really put a splinter in between them both. And now Tashi is questioning, what she really wants in this relationship. And she feels like if she's going to be with the tennis player, she's going to want to make sure he does his best. She wants to be with somebody that's on her level in terms of motivation and also like work ethic, someone that maybe is a little closer to Art, and that causes a rift between them two here, of course. While Patrick is a little bit more relaxed, he's more reliant on his just innate talent and criticizes Tashi for meditating for a simple match that's not going to be that hard. He wants to play in his own way, and as we see later on, it doesn't really lead to his success. She feels like he needs some coaching, and she could do that. But Patrick just wants to be seen as equal peers, not a student. He doesn't want to be part of the Tashi Dunkanator fan club. And that seems to accept Tashi, and thus showing that Art had a point that, she does seem to want someone who's more devoted, someone who maybe is a big fan, and wants to be coached, and wants to be the best they can be. I think this is just a perfect scene that shows the stark differences between them both, and and how they're both flawed in opposite ways, and how they want different things in a relationship. And this all naturally leads to her wanting to date Art, so Art gets what he wants. But then as we see further on, even that relationship isn't perfect, and it's missing something. A little bit of that Patrick swagger, maybe. So then, of course, this all leads to her underperforming at her next match. She gets that injury. Art, of course, is there to help her up and swoop in while Patrick gets left behind. So you can see this as somewhat orchestrated, intentionally or not, by Art, by introducing this rift between Tashi and Patrick. This little nugget of, he's not devoted, he doesn't love you, you need someone better. So back in their future, they're married, but now Art is getting tired of the tennis life. And although Tashi says that it's okay for him to retire, if that's what he wants, we're not quite sure how she's going to handle it once he does retire. But until that point, she's going to do everything she can to make sure that he succeeds and gets that championship. So she has to go behind his back and make sure the next match between him and Patrick that he wins, because she feels that's going to motivate him to go to the end. And if he loses, that's going to be the end. And then she's not ready for that. She goes and texts Patrick to make sure he loses on purpose. And that leads to the climax. But before we get to the climax, let's look at that sauna scene. And now we get to the sauna scene, which I think is probably one of the most important scenes. And it mirrors the scene in which Patrick and Tashi were fighting back in Stanford. So this is Art and Patrick's contentious back and forth before the big match. Art makes it clear how they're different, how he feels like Patrick hasn't grown up, and how they're not really peers anymore. Art is almost like in another league. He's just passing through this challenges match, while Patrick is often at this level, hardly ever getting to the top position, because of his flaws as a player, not wanting to be coached, trying to play it his own way, not being disciplined. He's never been able to reach the heights that Art has, even if he might inherently have more skill or talent. He doesn't put in that work. But as they talk about this, they're also kind of like talking about their relationship with Tashi at the same time. And again, we get them talking about tennis, but are they really talking about tennis? This scene also showcases like the best of this movie when it comes to its editing and its back and forth cutting between past and present. For example, this cut here from them discussing about how Art is disturbed that Tashi was into him as teenagers, was into Patrick as teenagers. Patrick's like, oh yeah, as teenagers, because surely that's the only time we've been together. But then it cuts back to some years ago when Patrick and Tashi, meet up by chance and have a little bit of an affair, showing that, yeah, Tashi still has some lusty feelings for Patrick. Perhaps it's not like super serious. He can provide something that Art can't. And so you think maybe the sauna scene's over at this point, but then it cuts back at the exact moment where it left off. Like, yeah, we were together as teenagers, yeah, for sure. And then you think maybe we're not gonna go back to the previous scene, but then it cuts back to it, and guess what? It looks like Art was aware that they were there together. He might not have seen them kiss. He can surmise that they went off and actually did something, but that moment has been simmering in his mind this whole time. He still feels threatened by Patrick, after all these years, even though he's not outwardly showing it. I think with the editing of the back and forth, it's like probably one of the best done scenes, really, up until the ending, which I think it falters a bit because I think it gets a little bit too satisfied with the score. I think they put in the score again here at the end, the upbeat electronic music, to heighten the scene a little more. That I don't think it really needed it. I guess they were trying to match the earlier scene between Tashi and Patrick at Stanford. They play this music one too many times in this movie, and this is the moment where I think they went over the edge. You can actually see how the music doesn't match so well with the scene because the audio of the dialogue like raises up in volume a little bit noticeably when the music comes in.
I always tried to figure out what happened to you, but the more I've thought about it, the more
And perhaps it's an indication that by the end of the movie, it kind of is a little bit too self-indulgent in its style, which we'll see coming up here in the climactic final battle, the final match, which we've been seeing throughout the whole movie. Intercut, and each time we cut back, we get more context on like the stakes of the match, which I think is pretty cool. Okay, so here we are at the final match. So at this point, we know that Tashi approached Patrick to ask him to forfeit the game or to make it look like he lost, convincingly, so it could motivate Art to end his career on a high note, But anyway, Patrick decides to give that signal to Art that like, hey, I'm losing this on purpose. And this signals a callback to the earlier scene. And now he's saying it again, that, yeah, I slept with Tashi again. And that gets Art thinking, He stops in his tracks, like, wait a second, what does that mean? And he figures it out, He's like, oh, that's why he's playing so badly right now. They must have made a deal, So he figures it out, and that's their, they communicate on the court that way. He gets angry, he like curses and gives him a penalty, which I think is pretty harsh. You can't say fuck in a tennis match, I guess. I don't know all the rules and stuff. And he decides to also start losing for a bit just to get to a tiebreak and actually make this a real match. Let's put everything into it. Oh, first he's just taking out his anger. I don't know the rules here, but I imagine that this didn't count because he didn't hit the ground, or the ball didn't hit the ground, it just went straight over him. He just, he had to express his anger, like he's mad that freaking Patrick did this scheming behind his back, and slept with Tashi, and Tashi, Okay, so here's the point where he's like, okay, he puts it there, he's gonna smile. That's gonna give Patrick the sign that like, hey, let's do this for real, And with Patrick smiling back, that shows that he gets it, They're in sync. Let the best man win, Let's do it. And this is when the viewer literally becomes a tennis ball. We're literally being tossed around the court as we're trying to follow this love story, just as Tashi as well. I do wish we a little more indication on like what Tashi was going through right here in this moment, because it's not quite clear if she understands what they're doing. But as it continues, I imagine she gets the idea that like, oh, they're like actually playing for real this time. This is definitely the most kinetic, the most intense action of the movie, camera-wise, editing-wise, the music, the emotions, the stakes are so high, of course. It's really a great build-up. It's a little bit confusing because he seems like he's about to stumble and like he does touch the net. Again, I don't know the exact rules here, but it seems like he wins because he's able to hit the ball. He does hit the ball here, and it seems to indicate that it landed within bounds, giving him the point to win. Everyone's cheering, you know, but at this exact same moment, he's caught by Patrick, symbolizing that they've repaired their friendship. It's both a hug of congratulations, but also of mending. And Art finally defeated Patrick. He's going to go on with massive confidence into the next higher ranked games. But in a way, I guess they one-upped Tashi here, beating her at her game. Reading it that way really puts a bad light on Tashi, and like it does feel like a triumphant ending, but it underserves Zendaya's character here. But I like to read it more like Tashi is fully aware of what's happening at the end here, and she's realizing, her faults and her mistake for putting them against each other in this way, and that's why she's smiling and happy. Like her little white boys have grown up and are no longer fighting for her but for themselves. And she's also proud of Art for defeating Patrick fair and square. And so in a way, she's also growing from this moment, that she doesn't need to do the scheming behind Art's back, and she's not going to do it from moving forward, And with the movie ending here, it does feel like a happy, feel-good moment. You could even go as far as interpreting this as a polyamorous situation going forward. Maybe all three will get what they want from each other. Either way, it does seem like things are looking up from here on out. That said, the audience has to do the mental work to really complete Tashi's arc here, I think. I feel like we need a little bit more here. But because it ends at that exact moment and we don't get a denouement or anything after, I guess, I'm just going to fill in the blanks with my headcanon and just choose to see it more optimistically for all characters. Not just a vehicle for Art and Patrick. And besides the whole narrative conclusion there, I think the only other thing that detracted from this final climax is that it did feel like it was a little bit too self-satisfied, too indulgent in its style here, and its camera work, and its slow-mo, the sweating, the endless teasing. Some of that just went a little bit too long, and maybe if they were a little bit more concise with it, just a tad more, it would have played a little better for me. But but overall, I had a good time with the movie. It's the kind of movie I feel like we don't see too much anymore. It's like a really tight script anchored by some great performances, and it just has this real good energy without having to focus so much on the actual sport, and more so on the characters. But I still like some of the spectacle, even though it's a bit low-key compared to some action movies. Like the amount of CG that went into the tennis ball, I'm sure took a lot of hours to get that right. I'm pretty sure every time we see a tennis ball, it's actually not real. I'm sure there's a lot of cool little hidden special effects we didn't even notice. I'm sure the moment where they were all in the wind, I'm pretty sure this is all CG debris. And the music was good, really got your heart pumping to match the intensity of the tennis match. With the exception of that one moment in the sauna, I think it was well done. Yeah, so what do y'all think? Let me know in the comments. How do you interpret the ending? Do you feel were you satisfied with the conclusion of each of the characters' arcs? Were you satisfied with the big hug at the end? Do you think Tashi deserved a better conclusion? I think it's the most accessible Luca Guadagnino movie, so I think a lot of people have been talking about it, right? But that will do it for now. I'll see ya next time under the moonlight, maybe. Bye.